The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as the boardroom erupted into chaos. Across the polished mahogany table, faces contorted with disbelief and anger. At the center of it all stood Lila Monroe, her fists clenched at her sides, chest heaving with a mix of fury and triumph. The air was thick with tension, papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves in an autumn storm. "Just wait until you see what happens next," she spat out, her voice cutting through the cacophony of raised voices. "You think this is bad? This is just the beginning." It had started with a simple email, a rejection that cut deeper than any blade could. Lila had poured 3 years of her life into transforming their struggling marketing department into a powerhouse operation. She'd single-handedly secured their most lucrative client, turning a $500,000 contract into a $20 million annual partnership. And for what? A pat on the back and empty promises of recognition? When she'd walked into the CEO's office that morning, expecting to discuss her well-deserved bonus, she'd been met with condescending smiles and carefully crafted excuses. "Budget constraints," they'd said. "Company priorities." The words still burned in her ears as she replayed the conversation in her mind. "Your contributions are invaluable," the CEO had told her, his expensive watch glinting under the office lights. "But we have to consider the bigger picture. Perhaps next quarter." His voice trailed off, leaving her standing there, numb with shock. 3 hours later, she found herself in the conference room, watching as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. The company's CFO was pacing back and forth, his face pale as he explained how their primary revenue stream had suddenly evaporated. Their biggest client, her client, had terminated their contract without warning, citing strategic realignment as their reason. What they didn't know was that Lila had spent those 3 hours making certain phone calls, sending specific emails, and activating a contingency plan she'd been developing for months. The same contingency plan that now left her former employers staring at financial ruin while she prepared to walk out the door with more than just her dignity intact. As the shouting intensified around her, Lila felt a peculiar sense of calm wash over her body. For 3 years, she'd played by their rules, sacrificed her personal life, and delivered results beyond anyone's expectations. Now, as she watched the power dynamics shift before her eyes, she realized something fundamental about the business world. Loyalty was a currency that only worked when exchanged equally. "You'll regret this," the CEO finally managed to say, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "No one crosses us and gets away with it." Lila's lips curved into a dangerous smile as she gathered her belongings. "Watch me," she whispered, before turning on her heel and walking toward the door. Behind her, the company she'd helped build teetered on the edge of collapse, while ahead lay a future filled with possibilities she'd only dared to dream about. The first time Lila truly understood the depths of corporate politics was during her 2nd year at the firm. She'd been promoted to senior marketing director after successfully spearheading a campaign that increased their market share by 23%. It should have been a moment of pure triumph, but instead, it marked the beginning of her education in the art of subtle sabotage. Her colleagues, once friendly and collaborative, began treating her differently. During meetings, her ideas were met with skeptical silence, only to be presented as someone else's brilliant strategy days later. The resources she needed for projects would mysteriously disappear or get redirected to less critical initiatives. Even her assistant, who had been with her since day one, started receiving conflicting instructions from upper management. At first, Lila thought it was just typical workplace competition. But then came the incident with the Johnson account. She'd spent weeks developing a comprehensive marketing strategy that would revolutionize their approach to digital advertising. The night before the presentation, her computer crashed unexpectedly. When IT restored her files, all her detailed analytics and custom graphics were gone, replaced with corrupted documents that made no sense. She pulled an all-nighter reconstructing everything from memory, presenting a slightly less polished version the next morning. The client was impressed enough to sign, but during the celebratory lunch, she overheard 2 senior managers discussing how fortunate it was that her original presentation had failed. They believed it forced her to simplify her approach, making it more accessible to the client. That was when Lila began building her defenses. She started documenting every interaction, every decision, every success. She created redundant backups of all her work, storing them in multiple locations, both digital and physical. She cultivated relationships outside the company, attending industry events and conferences where she could showcase her talents independently of her employer's brand. The real turning point came when she secured the Thompson Corporation account. Her pitch had been flawless, her strategy innovative yet practical. The $500,000 initial contract quickly grew as she delivered results beyond their expectations. Within 6 months, the account was worth $20 million annually, accounting for nearly 40% of the company's total revenue. But with each success came new challenges. Requests for additional resources were denied. Her team was consistently understaffed while other departments received extra personnel. Performance reviews praised her achievements while simultaneously questioning her leadership style and strategic vision. The message was clear: do your job exceptionally well, but don't expect anything in return. Through it all, Lila maintained her composure, her professionalism. She continued delivering results because that's what she did best. But inside, she was building something else entirely: a network of contacts, a reputation independent of her current employer, and most importantly, a deep understanding of what the Thompson Corporation really needed versus what her company was willing to provide. When the bonus denial email arrived, it wasn't just about the money. It was the culmination of years of being told she wasn't enough, despite proving otherwise repeatedly. That morning, as she sat in the CEO's office listening to their excuses, she realized she'd already built everything she needed to not just survive but thrive on her own terms. The clock struck midnight as Lila sat alone in her home office, surrounded by years of meticulously organized documentation and carefully cultivated relationships. Her laptop screen illuminated the room with a soft blue glow, casting shadows across walls lined with industry awards and framed testimonials from satisfied clients. This wasn't just preparation, it was survival instinct honed over countless battles fought and won behind closed doors. Months before, she'd begun cultivating a special relationship with Marcus Thompson, the CEO of their flagship client. It started innocently enough, regular check-ins that evolved into strategy sessions, then into discussions about broader industry trends and future opportunities. Unlike her own superiors, Marcus valued her insights, sought her opinions, and respected her expertise. In him, she found what she'd always craved from her current employer: genuine appreciation for her capabilities. Their last meeting, held in a discreet corner of a high-end restaurant, had sealed her resolve. "You're wasted here," Marcus had said, swirling his glass of Merlot. "I've seen what you can do when you're not constantly fighting against your own company's limitations." His words weren't just casual observation, they were a lifeline thrown deliberately and with purpose. Every successful professional knows the importance of having options, and Lila had been quietly building hers for years. There were the freelance contracts she'd negotiated on nights and weekends, establishing herself as a consultant in her own right. The speaking engagements at major industry conferences where she'd positioned herself not just as a representative of her company, but as an independent thought leader. The LinkedIn connections she'd nurtured, messages exchanged, and favors discreetly collected. Her home office served as command central for these operations. File cabinets held not just client information but detailed analyses of market trends, competitor weaknesses, and potential partnerships. On her desk lay 3 separate phones, one for work, one for personal use, and one burner device she'd used exclusively for communications related to her contingency plans. Each conversation, each email, each handshake had been another brick in the foundation of her escape route. Most crucially, she developed what she called her insurance policy, a comprehensive analysis of every shortcoming, every missed opportunity, every deliberate decision her company had made that had cost the Thompson Corporation potential growth. These weren't just complaints, they were documented facts, supported by data, client feedback, and market research. She knew exactly where their vulnerabilities lay and how to exploit them if necessary. The night before her fateful meeting with the CEO, she'd activated phase 1 of her plan. Key contacts within the Thompson Corporation received carefully worded emails highlighting emerging market opportunities and suggesting alternative approaches to their current strategy. Nothing overt, nothing actionable yet, just planting seeds of doubt about their existing partnership. Simultaneously, she'd reached out to trusted allies in the industry, confirming their willingness to support her transition should she need to make a move. In her encrypted cloud storage, she maintained a folder titled Project Phoenix, containing everything from potential office locations to staffing requirements for a new venture. She'd even drafted letters of intent to several key members of her current team, knowing they too had grown frustrated with the company's internal politics. These were people who shared her vision, her work ethic, and her desire for something better. As she reviewed her preparations that night, Lila felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't just about revenge or even justice, It was about taking control of her destiny. Every late night spent analyzing market data, every weekend sacrificed for professional development, every personal relationship neglected in pursuit of career advancement, all of it had led to this moment. She wasn't just ready to leave, she was ready to transform the entire landscape of her industry. The weight of her accumulated knowledge and connections settled comfortably around her shoulders. Tomorrow, when she walked into that boardroom, she wouldn't be the same woman who had entered countless meetings hoping for recognition or approval. She would be someone entirely different, someone who understood that true power came not from waiting for others to acknowledge your worth, but from creating a situation where denying that worth became impossible. The storm broke exactly as Lila had anticipated. By mid-morning, the reality of their situation had sunken among the executive team, and the boardroom transformed into a pressure cooker of blame and desperation. Phones rang incessantly as panicked executives tried to salvage what remained of their crumbling empire. The CFO's hands trembled as he ran damage control calculations, each number painting a bleaker picture than the last. Marketing Director Rachel Chun burst through the doors, her usually composed demeanor shattered. "They're calling everyone back," she shouted, holding up her phone. "Thompson's PR team just released a statement. They're launching their own internal marketing division, poaching our entire team." Lila watched from her corner, arms crossed, as the room descended further into chaos. Sales manager Greg Harrison slammed his fist on the table. "This isn't possible. We had them locked in with exclusivity clauses." His face turned crimson as he scanned the legal documents spread across the table. "Wait, these dates, they've been planning this for months." "That's impossible," interjected operations manager Karen Liu. "We would have noticed." "They wouldn't have," Lila interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "Not if they were careful. Not if they had help from someone who knew exactly how our systems worked." She stepped forward, letting the implication hang in the air. Someone who understood precisely which resources were allocated where, which contracts were due for renewal, and which team members were most valuable. The CEO's face drained of color as realization dawned. "You planned this." "Oh, I did more than plan," Lila replied, her tone cold and clinical. "I executed. While you were busy explaining to me why my bonus wasn't feasible, I was securing my future, and theirs." She gestured toward the windows overlooking the city. "Right now, Thompson Corporation is announcing their new chief marketing officer. Someone who understands their needs, their challenges, their potential. Someone who won't hold them back with outdated strategies and bureaucratic nonsense." The room exploded again, but Lila remained focused, watching the pieces fall into place exactly as she'd orchestrated. Human Resources Director Mark Thompson, no relation, rushed in, his face pale. "We've got resignations pouring in from every department. Account managers, creative directors, even some of our senior developers, they're all leaving." "Of course they are," Lila said, her voice rising above the growing panic. "Because unlike this company, I actually listened to them. I understood their frustrations, their ambitions, their dreams. I built relationships based on mutual respect rather than corporate hierarchy." She circled the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. "While you were busy protecting your precious corner offices, I was building something real." Legal counsel Sarah Mitchell frantically flipped through documents. "There has to be something we can do. Breach of contract, confidentiality agreements." Lila laughed, a bitter sound that silenced the room. "Go ahead, try. Everything I did was completely above board. Those confidential documents you're looking for? They're sitting in plain sight, buried in your own inefficient filing system. The client relationships I built? They were never exclusive to this company. As for my team..." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the terrified faces. "They were never yours to begin with." The CEO lunged forward, his face inches from hers. "You think you're clever? Taking everything from us?" "I'm not taking anything," Lila corrected, her voice steady. "I'm claiming what was always mine. My work, my reputation, my future. You had your chance to be part of it. Instead, you chose to treat me like disposable talent." She straightened her posture, her presence commanding the entire room. "Now watch as everything you took for granted, your security, your stability, your very existence as a viable company, disappears faster than you ever imagined possible." As if on cue, the lights flickered, followed by an announcement over the intercom. Attention staff, due to unforeseen circumstances, we must temporarily suspend all non-essential operations. The message dissolved into static, mirroring the chaos unfolding below in the main offices. Lila glanced at her watch, timing everything perfectly. Right about now, your remaining clients are receiving notices about restructuring. Your investors are getting wind of the hemorrhaging accounts. And your employees. She smiled, a predator's grin. They're realizing that loyalty to a sinking ship is a fool's errand. The room fell silent except for the sound of ringing phones and distant shouts from other departments. Through the window, Lila could see employees gathering in clusters on the street below, clutching boxes of personal belongings. The media vans had arrived, their satellite dishes sprouting like mushrooms outside the building. Reporters pressed against the security barriers, hungry for details of the spectacular corporate implosion. You wanted to play games, Lila said softly, addressing the stunned executives. Congratulations. You've just become the biggest story in corporate America. She picked up her briefcase, feeling lighter than she had in years. Enjoy trying to explain this mess to your shareholders. As for me. She headed toward the door, pausing just long enough to deliver her final blow. I'll be busy building something better. The elevator doors closed behind her, sealing her departure and marking the beginning of a new chapter. Above her, the company she'd helped build unraveled thread by thread, while below, reporters captured the exodus of talent streaming out of the building. Through it all, Lila maintained perfect composure, her steps measured and confident as she walked toward a future she'd meticulously engineered, one where her worth would never again be questioned or denied. The elevator descended with a soft hum, each floor bringing Lila closer to her new reality. As the doors opened into the marble-floored lobby, she was greeted by the sight of chaos, employees clutching cardboard boxes, reporters shouting questions, and security guards struggling to maintain order. Yet amidst the pandemonium, Lila felt an unshakable calm. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the polished floor as heads turned in her direction. For a moment, there was silence. Then whispers erupted like wildfire. Is that her? Did she really do it? She looks so composed. Lila didn't break stride. She walked through the crowd with purpose, her gaze steady, her presence commanding respect even from those who had once doubted her. The glass doors slid open, and she emerged into the crisp morning air, where a black town car waited for her at the curb. Inside the vehicle, Marcus Thompson was already seated, his expression unreadable but tinged with admiration. You played your cards perfectly, he said as the driver pulled away from the crumbling scene behind them. Are you ready for what comes next? Lila leaned back against the leather seat, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I've been ready for years, she replied, her voice firm. Now it's time to build something that lasts. Months later, Lila stood on a stage bathed in warm light, addressing a room filled with industry leaders, journalists, and innovators. The event was being live-streamed worldwide, and cameras captured every detail of her poised demeanor. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the logo of Phoenix Marketing Group, the company she had founded after leaving her former employer in ruins. Today marks not just the launch of a new agency, she began, her voice resonating through the elegant ballroom, but the beginning of a movement. A movement toward transparency, collaboration, and mutual respect in business. At Phoenix Marketing Group, we believe that success isn't measured by how much you take, it's measured by how much you give back. The audience erupted into applause, but Lila held up a hand to quiet them. Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing briefly on familiar faces, former colleagues who had followed her to this new venture, clients who had trusted her vision, and mentors who had supported her journey. Among them sat Marcus Thompson, now officially her partner in the enterprise, nodding approvingly. We built this company on principles that many thought were impossible in today's cutthroat world, she continued. We prioritize our team's well-being over profit margins. We invest in long-term relationships rather than short-sighted gains. And most importantly, we value integrity above all else. A hush fell over the room as she paused, her gaze locking onto the camera broadcasting her speech to millions. To anyone watching who feels undervalued, overlooked, or dismissed, I want you to know that your worth is not defined by others. It's yours to claim. Build your own table if no one will give you a seat at theirs. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing off the high ceilings and spilling out into the streets beyond. Reporters scrambled to capture quotes, analysts debated the implications of her bold statements, and social media lit up with hashtags like #ClaimYourWorth and #ThePhoenixRises. Overnight, Lila became more than a successful entrepreneur, she became a symbol of resilience and empowerment. In the weeks that followed, the impact of her actions rippled across industries. Her former company filed for bankruptcy within 6 months, its executives embroiled in lawsuits and public scandals. Meanwhile, Phoenix Marketing Group thrived, attracting top talent and securing lucrative contracts with companies eager to align themselves with Lila's revolutionary approach to business. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when she received a letter from Rachel Chun, her former colleague. Enclosed was a newspaper clipping about Phoenix Marketing Group's record-breaking first quarter. Scrolled across the bottom in Rachel's handwriting were 3 words: "Thank you." Lila smiled as she tucked the note into her desk drawer, alongside other mementos of her journey. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, building something meaningful rarely was, but she also knew she had created a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. That evening, as she stood on the balcony of her penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, Lila allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The lights below twinkled like stars, each one representing a dream, a goal, a life changed by hard work and determination. She thought about the young woman she used to be, the one who had walked into boardrooms hoping for validation, and realized she barely recognized her anymore. Now, standing tall and unapologetic, Lila Monroe was no longer just a name. She was a legacy. And as the city buzzed with energy beneath her, she whispered to herself, almost as a promise,